The colony on Arcadia 9 was considered Earth's weakest outpost in the vast network of space settlements. It was a small, dusty patch of land on the edge of known space, barely equipped with enough defenses to keep the wind from blowing through its fragile shelters. Most people back on Earth didn't even remember it was there, let alone cared about its survival. Arcadia 9 was a place where failures were sent, and hope was a rare commodity. The colonists themselves were a mixed bunch, scientists, technicians, and a handful of farmers, scraping by on limited resources and outdated tech. The military presence was almost non-existent. They had a few rusted old turrets and a handful of guards, but nothing compared to the advanced fleets roaming the nearby systems. Their communications with Earth were often spotty, and reinforcements were always a day or two away, if they arrived at all. Despite all that, life on Arcadia 9 had a steady rhythm. People worked hard, fixing what was broken, growing what could be eaten, and dreaming of a better future. But deep down, everyone knew the colony was vulnerable. They lived in constant fear that one day, some hostile force would find them and wipe them out in an instant. And that day came sooner than anyone expected. At dawn, alarms shattered the silence. Radar screens lit up with hostile signatures. An enemy fleet had arrived, and they weren't here to negotiate. The colonists scrambled, rushing to man their outdated defenses. Panic swept through the colony like wildfire. Many doubted they had any chance against the overwhelming force about to descend on them. The weakest colony was about to be the easiest target. But something unexpected happened. The commander of the colony, a weathered woman named Lena, refused to give in to despair. Her voice rang clear over the chaos, rallying the colonists to prepare for a fight that would soon shake the stars. They had nothing to lose and everything to prove. As the enemy ships closed in, the colonists operated with a fierce determination, born from years of neglect and isolation. Their weapons were crude, their armor thin, but their spirit was unbreakable. They didn't just want to survive, they wanted to send a message that even the weakest colony could stand tall. In the next 7 minutes, Arcadia 9 would face its greatest test. No one could have predicted what would happen next. The first moments of the attack felt like a nightmare come true. The sky above Arcadia 9 darkened as alien ships, sleek and menacing, swarmed into the colony's atmosphere. They moved with an efficiency that screamed of experience and power. The colony's sensors, old and strained, barely tracked the fast-moving vessels, and the primitive defenses began their sluggish preparations. The colonists watched from their shelters and command posts, some frozen in terror, others clutching their weapons as best they could. There was no doubt the enemy vastly outmatched them. The alien fleet wasn't just coming to conquer. They were here to erase Arcadia 9 from existence, to make an example of what happens to Earth's forgotten failures. Lena stood on the balcony of the command center, her eyes scanning the horizon. She was in her late 40s, with lines etched deep from years of worry and battle, but her spirit remained fierce. Her voice cut through the panic as she ordered, "All turrets, lock on target Alpha. Infantry, hold your positions. Engineering, keep the shields up no matter what." Her officers moved quickly, barking orders into comms, trying to coordinate with limited resources. The turrets, ancient and sputtering, powered up with a grinding sound. Missiles locked and loaded, but their range was limited, and their guidance systems outdated. The colonists knew this was going to be a fight of guts, not technology. The first shots fired were shaky and slow. The colony's weapons barely scratched the hulls of the alien fighters, which responded with deadly precision. Bolts of energy streaked through the air, tearing apart the outer perimeter defenses. Several small outposts were reduced to rubble within seconds. Inside the command center, the atmosphere was tense. The communication officer, a young man named Jace, kept updating the status. "Turret 2 is down. Shields at 40%. Incoming fighter squadron breaking formation." Lena gritted her teeth. "We hold the line. We make every second count." Outside, the colonists braced themselves. Farmers who had never held a rifle before found themselves gripping outdated pulse rifles handed down from previous conflicts. Technicians operated the broken defense systems with desperate precision. Every person, no matter their role, became part of the battle. As the alien fighters swooped in for a second attack, a strange thing happened. The colonists' defense, though weak and battered, began to tell a different story. One of the small, rusted turrets managed to fire a perfectly timed missile, hitting an alien ship's engine and sending it spiraling out of control. Cheers erupted in the command center for a brief moment. Victory, however small, gave them hope. But the aliens quickly retaliated. Their bigger ships unleashed powerful plasma blasts that tore through the colony's only shield generator. With the shields down, the colony's infrastructure was exposed, vulnerable to the brutal assault. Lena knew this was the critical moment. The colony's survival depended on quick thinking and unity. "Engineering teams, reroute power to auxiliary shields. Infantry, fall back to secondary defense lines. Don't let them reach the habitat domes." The colonists scrambled, moving like a well-oiled machine despite their lack of experience. People who barely knew each other worked side by side, setting up makeshift barricades, repairing damaged weaponry, and covering each other's backs. In the midst of the chaos, Lena's voice remained steady. She called out to every sector, inspiring courage. "We may be the weakest colony, but we're the last line of defense. Fight not just for yourselves, but for everyone on Earth who was told you'd fail. We're stronger than they think." The alien fleet was relentless. Fighter squadrons dove repeatedly, dropping bombs and firing energy beams that tore through the colony's defenses. The sky burned with explosions and smoke. Buildings crumbled, and the ground shook with the force of the assault. Yet, in the face of destruction, the colonists fought back with surprising effectiveness. Their intimate knowledge of the terrain gave them an edge in setting traps and ambushes. The ruined outposts became kill zones, and hidden turrets fired from unexpected angles. Jace's voice crackled over the radio again. "We've downed 6 fighters in the last minute. Enemy command ship is adjusting position." Lena's eyes narrowed. The command ship was the real threat, a massive, heavily armed vessel capable of devastating the colony with a single barrage. "Target the command ship's sensors. We blind them. We might buy more time." The colonists' weapon operators aimed every available missile, energy blast, and makeshift projectile at the command ship. Despite their inferior firepower, a handful of shots found their mark. The alien ship's sensors flickered and died, causing confusion among its fleet. That brief disruption gave the colony a chance. Lena ordered a bold counterattack. "Prepare the assault squad. We strike the enemy fighters directly." A group of volunteers, some soldiers, and some colonists turned fighters, armed themselves with what little heavy weaponry they had. Old rocket launchers, pulse rifles, and even improvised explosives. They boarded a battered dropship, flying straight into the heart of the alien fleet. The assault squad moved like shadows in the chaos, targeting vulnerable fighters and disrupting enemy formations. Their bravery caught the aliens off guard, forcing several ships to retreat or crash. It was a desperate gambit, but it worked. 7 minutes into the battle, something extraordinary happened. The colony, against all odds and expectations, was no longer the weakest link. The aliens were retreating, battered and confused. The once overconfident invaders had underestimated the resolve of these failures from Earth. Lena allowed herself a brief smile as she watched the enemy ships disappear beyond the atmosphere. The colony had survived, but the victory came with a heavy cost. The colony was scarred, buildings were destroyed, several colonists were injured or lost, and the fragile hope that had sustained them now hung by a thread. As the dust settled, Lena addressed the weary survivors over the colony's speakers. "Today we showed that even the weakest can stand tall. We fought not just for Arcadia 9, but for every forgotten soul who believed they were too weak to matter. This victory isn't just ours, it's humanity's. The colonists cheered, exhausted but proud. The message spread quickly through the colonies and back to Earth. Against the cold judgment of their commanders and the sneers of distant bureaucrats, the weakest colony had risen. In the weeks that followed, Arcadia 9 became a symbol of hope. Scientists and soldiers from other colonies studied the battle, searching for the secrets of how a ragtag group had won in 7 minutes. But for Lena and her people, it was simpler than strategy or technology. It was about heart, about refusing to give up even when no one believed in them. It was about standing together, facing the storm, and fighting with everything they had. The weakest colony had triumphed, and the galaxy would never forget. The victory at Arcadia 9 was swift but brutal. In just 7 minutes, the colony had repelled an enemy fleet that should have crushed them without effort. But that victory wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a far greater struggle. When the last alien ship disappeared beyond the colony's battered atmosphere, silence fell over the ruins. The survivors, bloodied and exhausted, stepped out into the dim light of the planet's twin suns. The land was scarred by fire and explosions, the air thick with smoke and dust. What remained of the settlement looked fragile, like a paper fortress barely holding against the storm. Lena stood among her people, her heart heavy. The cost of survival was painfully clear. Families had lost loved ones, friends were missing. The fragile shelters that protected them from Arcadia 9's harsh climate were shattered. Yet, despite all that, no one spoke of surrender. Instead, they began the painstaking work of rebuilding. "We'll get through this," Lena said quietly, though her voice carried strength. "We have to. Earth is counting on us." But even as the colonists cleared rubble and tended to the wounded, the political reality of their victory began to cast a shadow over their triumph. Back on Earth, news of the battle was met with mixed reactions. The media hailed Arcadia 9 as a symbol of resilience, but in the halls of power, the conversation was far colder. Many military officials questioned how a fleet had been allowed to get so close to one of their own colonies in the first place. Accusations flew. Had the colony been abandoned, deliberately left vulnerable? Was this a failure of command or a strategic decision to sacrifice a weak outpost to distract the enemy? The whispers of betrayal reached Arcadia 9 like distant echoes. Lena knew the truth was more complicated. The military had stretched resources thin across a dozen fronts. Arcadia 9 was always last on the list for reinforcements or upgrades. The commanders had written it off as a lost cause, an afterthought in the Grand War. But Lena's people had proven them wrong. Despite the politics, the colony's spirit was unbreakable. The victory had forged a bond between the colonists, a shared sense of purpose that transcended fear and loss. They began to train harder, repair their defenses, and reach out for help from nearby friendly systems. Their story spread quickly, inspiring other weak colonies that had long given up hope. Among the colonists, not everyone found comfort in the victory. Jace, the young communications officer, struggled with the trauma of battle. He had seen friends die, heard their last breaths over the radio, and lived with the haunting question of what might have been if they had failed. One evening, in the quiet aftermath of the fighting, Jace found himself wandering near the edge of the colony, staring out at the black void of space. The stars seemed distant and cold, indifferent to their struggles. Lena approached him silently. "You're carrying a lot, Jace." He looked up, eyes hollow. "How do you keep going when everything feels like it's falling apart? When the people who are supposed to protect us don't even care?" She sighed, the weight of command heavy on her shoulders. "Because giving up isn't an option. Because every life here matters. We fight not just for survival, but to prove we're worth fighting for." Jace nodded slowly, but the pain lingered. The victory was bittersweet. Meanwhile, strange rumors began to surface. The alien fleet that attacked Arcadia 9 was part of a larger force, a faction that believed humanity was weak and ripe for conquest. The fact that the weakest colony had repelled their attack was a blow to their pride, and a signal that Earth might be stronger than they expected. This shift in perception had consequences. Other alien powers started to take notice. Some were impressed by humanity's resilience, while others viewed it as a threat. The political landscape in the galaxy grew more volatile. At the same time, within the colony, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Resources were scarce, and not everyone agreed on how to rebuild or prepare for the inevitable next attack. Some wanted to focus on strengthening defenses, others pushed for diplomatic outreach, hoping to avoid further bloodshed. A heated debate erupted during a colony council meeting. Mara, the lead engineer, argued passionately. "We need better weapons, better shields. Waiting for help from Earth is a luxury we can't afford." On the other side, an elder named Thomas pleaded, "We must try to find peace. War will only bring more suffering. If we show strength but seek dialogue, maybe others will listen." Lena listened to both sides, knowing they were both right in their own way. The colony needed to be ready for war, but they couldn't survive forever on fighting alone. Diplomacy and alliances were as important as weapons. As the colony grappled with these difficult choices, Lena received a message from Earth's military command. It was curt and to the point. "Your defense was noted. Further orders pending. Maintain readiness." No praise, no promises of reinforcements. Just cold, bureaucratic silence. It stung, but Lena refused to let it break her. She called her officers together. "We fight our battles here. We survive on our own terms. Earth's neglect won't define us." Her determination ignited a fire in the colony. Volunteers signed up for extra training, mechanics scavenged parts to build new weapons, and scientists worked around the clock to improve their technology. The colony became a crucible of resilience. Yet even with the renewed focus, dangers lurked. Scouts reported strange movements beyond the colony's borders. Intelligence suggested the alien faction was regrouping, planning a larger invasion. Arcadia 9 was no longer just a weak outpost. It was a symbol and a target. In one of the quiet nights, Lena stood once more overlooking the horizon, her mind heavy with the weight of the future. She knew the next battle could be worse, that 7 minutes of triumph might turn into hours or days of hell. But she also knew something else. The people of Arcadia 9 had tasted victory. They had faced death and refused to bow. That made them dangerous, unpredictable. And in the cold expanse of space, sometimes that's all it takes to change the course of history. The victory on Arcadia 9 had shifted the colony's fragile peace into a tense calm, a quiet, before the storm no one wanted to admit was coming. Days turned into weeks, but the sense of looming danger hung over the settlement like a thick fog. Every crackle over the radio, every shadow moving just beyond the perimeter, set nerves on edge. Inside the command center, Lena and her officers worked relentlessly to prepare the colony. Their defenses were still patchy, hastily repaired turrets, scavenged weaponry, and makeshift barriers. But they were better than before. The engineers, led by Mara, had managed to jury-rig some of the old tech, boosting energy output and improving shield resilience. But the challenge wasn't just physical. The colony's morale fluctuated wildly. The residents were haunted by memories of the attack, and the ever-present fear of another assault gnawed at their resolve. One afternoon, Lena found herself walking through the central hub, watching the people as they went about their work. Children played among the ruins, their laughter a fragile counterpoint to the lingering tension. Farmers tended their crops, their hands steady but their eyes wary. Soldiers drilled relentlessly, their faces hardening with each passing day. Lena's gaze settled on Jace, who was hunched over a console, eyes bloodshot from too many sleepless nights. She approached quietly. "You should be resting," she said softly. Jace shook his head, rubbing his temples. "There's too much to do. The communications are still spotty. If another attack comes, we need to be ready to call for help immediately." She sighed. Help might not come in time. He looked up sharply. "Then we have to make sure we're strong enough on our own." Lena nodded, appreciating his determination but worried about the cost. "Just don't lose yourself in the process." Meanwhile, tensions within the colony's leadership grew. The debate over priorities, defense, diplomacy, or survival, became more heated. Mara pushed for more resources to be dedicated to weapon upgrades, insisting that their survival depended on being able to fight back harder. Thomas and others urged caution, arguing that making enemies might only hasten the colony's destruction. During a particularly fierce council meeting, voices rose, frustration spilling over. "We're not soldiers," Thomas shouted. "We're farmers, scientists, families. We need peace, not more war. And if peace means we get wiped out." Mara shot back. "I'd rather die fighting than be slaughtered without a chance." Lena stood, raising her hands to quiet the room. "Both of you are right. We need to be prepared to defend ourselves, but we also need to find allies and avoid unnecessary conflict. We survive by balancing strength with wisdom." The council fell silent, each member absorbing the weight of her words. Beyond the colony's borders, strange signals flickered across their scanners, unidentified ships moving at the edge of their range. Intelligence reports suggested the alien faction that attacked them had not only recovered, but was expanding, rallying other hostile groups. Arcadia 9 was becoming a beacon, drawing attention that was dangerous. One night, Lena received a coded message on a secure channel. It was from an unknown source, a nearby colony that had managed to survive by staying hidden. The message was brief but urgent. "Prepare. They come for us all. United, we stand a chance." Lena shared the news with her closest advisors. "This could be the opportunity we need," she said. "If we can unite the colonies, we can build a real defense." But unity would be hard. The colonies had been isolated for too long, suspicious of each other, competing for scarce resources. Fear had bred distrust. Lena knew that to build alliances, she would need to extend herself beyond the colony, risking exposure and possibly confrontation. She began planning a risky diplomatic mission to contact other settlements, hoping to spark a coalition before the enemy could strike again. Back in the colony, the personal toll of constant vigilance was becoming clear. Jace struggled with nightmares and isolation, haunted by the faces of those lost in the battle. He withdrew from friends, burying himself in work. Mara pushed herself harder than anyone, barely sleeping as she worked on improving weapons and defenses. Her hands trembled sometimes, but she refused to stop. Thomas spent long hours tending to the sick and injured, his gentle nature a balm against the colony's harsh realities. One evening, as a storm swept over the barren landscape, Lena found herself in the medbay, watching Thomas care for a young child recovering from shrapnel wounds. The child's mother sat nearby, eyes red from crying. "This is why we fight," Lena whispered. Thomas nodded without looking up. "Every life here is a reason." The next morning brought unsettling news. Scouts reported that a small fleet of unknown ships was moving closer, too close. Panic rippled through the colony. Was it an advance force of the alien faction, or something else? Lena ordered immediate lockdown and full combat readiness. The colonists braced themselves, the memories of the last attack sharp in their minds. When the ships arrived, they were unlike anything the colony had seen before. Sleek, silent, and heavily armed, they hovered just beyond the outer perimeter. A tense standoff began. The new ships didn't attack. but their presence was a clear warning. Communications attempts were met with silence. Lena decided to send a delegation to meet with the newcomers, an act of courage and risk. She chose Jace to lead the team, hoping his calm under pressure would help. As Jace prepared for the mission, Lena pulled him aside. "This is more than a meeting. It's a test. Be ready for anything." Jace swallowed hard, but nodded. "I won't let you down." The delegation's shuttle lifted off into the dark sky, heading toward the alien fleet. The colony held its breath. Inside the shuttle, Jace's hands trembled on the controls. The unknown ships radiated power and mystery. The crew whispered fears and hopes in hushed tones. When they docked, the alien leaders greeted them with cold curiosity. The delegation was taken to a chamber filled with strange technology and unfamiliar symbols. The negotiations began, tense and fragile. The aliens offered terms, demands for surrender and submission. They spoke of peace, but their words dripped with threat. Jace and his team held firm. They refused to bow, insisting on the colony's right to survive and defend itself. After hours of talks, no agreement was reached. The delegation returned to Arcadia 9 with grim news. The aliens were preparing for a larger invasion, seeing humanity's defiance as a challenge that must be crushed. The colony's leaders convened again, the weight of impending war heavy in the air. Lena's voice was steady but fierce. "We don't have the luxury of waiting. We must act now, strengthen our defenses, build alliances, and prepare for the fight of our lives." The colonists threw themselves into the work. Every hand was needed, every resource stretched. The colony transformed from a quiet outpost to a fortress. In the quiet moments between storms and drills, Lena thought about the future. The fragile hope that had carried them through 7 minutes of battle now faced a test far greater. But she believed in her people, in their heart, their courage, their refusal to be forgotten. The weakest colony was no longer weak. They were ready to fight. Lena watched the shuttle disappear into the dark horizon, carrying Jace and the delegation toward the distant colony that had sent the warning. It was a risky move, sending trusted people into the unknown. But if the scattered human settlements didn't unite, none of them would survive the storm coming their way. The colony's air was thick with tension. Every hour stretched long, filled with anxious anticipation and whispered fears. People moved about their tasks with a mix of determination and exhaustion, knowing the fragile peace could shatter at any moment. Days passed with no word from the delegation. Lena paced the command center, running through possible scenarios. Was the delegation welcomed? Was it captured or worse? The uncertainty gnawed at her. Finally, the shuttle returned, its engines sputtering but intact. Jace and the others stepped off, faces worn but alive. Lena rushed to meet them. "Tell me everything." Jace took a deep breath. "The colony is called Haven. They're cautious but willing to talk. They've been hiding, avoiding the aliens, but they know it's only a matter of time before the next attack. They want to unite, but the distrust runs deep." He paused. "Their leader, Commander Sarah, made it clear. No colony can survive alone. They're ready to fight, but only if we stand together." Relief mixed with urgency in Lena's chest. "Then we begin." Over the next weeks, envoys and messages flowed between Arcadia 9, Haven, and several other scattered colonies. Suspicion was a heavy barrier, shaped by years of isolation and hardship. Each settlement had its own scars and grudges, and the fear of betrayal lurked beneath every offer of alliance. Lena found herself navigating delicate negotiations, often meeting with leaders who questioned her colony's strength and resolve. Some saw Arcadia 9's recent victory as a fluke, a brief spark in an otherwise doomed outpost. One day she met with a council of leaders from 4 colonies gathered on Haven. The chamber was stark, walls lined with holographic maps of contested systems and fleet movements. The air buzzed with tension. A grizzled man named Corin spoke first, his voice rough from years of battle. "You ask us to trust the weakest colony, the one that was nearly wiped out? Why should we risk everything on a colony that might fall the next day?" Lena met his gaze steadily. "Because we fought. Because we survived when no one expected us to. And because the enemy wants to wipe us all out, one by one. Alone, we fall. Together, we stand a chance." Murmurs rippled through the council. Some nodded, others remained silent. Commander Sarah, a tall woman with sharp eyes, added, "Trust is earned, but we can't afford to waste time. The enemy is gathering forces. They will come for us all soon." The discussion stretched long into the night. Agreements were made, shared intelligence, coordinated defenses, resource exchanges. But the alliance remained fragile. Back on Arcadia 9, the colonists worked feverishly to upgrade their defenses. Mara led a team retrofitting turrets and building new energy shields. Thomas coordinated medical supplies and emergency response teams. Jace worked on enhancing communication networks to link the colonies securely. The colony buzzed with a renewed purpose, but also an undercurrent of fear. Everyone knew the peace was temporary. One evening, Lena stood outside the command center, watching the stars shimmer overhead. She thought of her people, their courage, their losses, their hope. A sudden alert snapped her attention back to reality. Scouts reported an unknown fleet moving toward the outer rim of their territory. This time, it was larger, faster, and more organized than before. Lena's heart sank. The aliens were coming back, and they were better prepared. She called an emergency meeting. "This isn't just another raid," she warned. "They're mobilizing for a full invasion. We have to be ready." The alliance was tested immediately. Haven sent reinforcements, a squadron of fighters and engineers, to Arcadia 9. Other colonies pledged support, but their resources were limited, stretched thin by their own defenses. As the invasion fleet approached, Lena coordinated the defense with a precision born from months of preparation. The colonists stood ready, not as isolated survivors but as part of a larger force. The first wave of the alien assault struck like a thunderclap. The skies exploded with fire and energy as Arcadia 9's turrets and allied fighters met the enemy head-on. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Despite their improved defenses, the colonists and their allies were pushed to their limits. Every inch of ground was contested fiercely. Lena commanded from the heart of the storm, directing reinforcements, managing resources, and inspiring her people. She moved like a force of nature, calm but relentless. Jace operated communications, keeping the alliance coordinated despite jamming attempts and interference. Mara and her engineers patched up damaged systems under fire, their hands steady even as explosions rocked their stations. The tide of battle swung back and forth. The aliens were powerful and ruthless, but the united colonies fought with a fierce determination, born of desperation and hope. In the thick of battle, Lena saw a squad of young fighters, barely out of training, holding a key position against overwhelming odds. Their bravery sparked a surge of courage across the defenders. Slowly, the alien fleet began to falter. Coordinated attacks from multiple colonies overwhelmed their forces. The invaders were forced to retreat, battered and broken. The victory was hard won, and the cost was high. Many lives were lost, and the colonies were left battered and exhausted. But the message was clear. Humanity's weakest colony had grown strong, not just through firepower, but through unity. As the survivors tended their wounds and rebuilt their shattered homes, Lena addressed the alliance once more. "Today we showed that no colony is too weak, no hope too small. Together we are strong. Together we will survive." The road ahead was still uncertain. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers and mysteries. But for the first time in a long time, the colonies faced the future as one. Arcadia 9 was no longer Earth's weakest colony. It was humanity's heart. The alliance that had been born out of necessity was proving as fragile as the battered shelters on Arcadia 9. The victory against the invading fleet was a moment of triumph, but the aftermath revealed the deeper fractures within the human colonies. Old grudges, suspicion, and competing ambitions threatened to unravel the fragile unity just as the true storm loomed on the horizon. Lena sat in the council chamber aboard the newly constructed command ship that orbited Arcadia 9, a symbol of their shared efforts. Around the oval table sat leaders from the Allied colonies, Commander Serra of Haven, Corin from the industrial colony of Tyros, and several others whose faces bore the marks of hardship and unyielding will. The air was thick with tension. Though they had fought together, now they bickered over resources, strategy, and leadership. Corin slammed his fist on the table. We barely survived because of Arcadia 9's foolish gamble. We need a new plan, one that doesn't waste lives on reckless stands. We should fortify Tyros and focus on rebuilding our fleets. Serra shot him a sharp look. And abandon those who stand on the front lines? Arcadia 9 is our shield, Corin. Without them, there is no line to defend. Lena held up her hand to calm the room. We all want survival, but survival means sacrifice. We can't pick and choose who to defend if we want to hold as one. The enemy won't wait while we argue. Corin scoffed, leaning back in his chair. You speak like a commander, but your colony was lucky, nothing more. Luck won't win the next battle. The words stung, and murmurs rippled around the room. Lena met Corin's eyes steadily. Luck is a luxury none of us can afford. We fight because we have no other choice. Despite the verbal clashes, the leaders knew the stakes. Their survival depended on maintaining the alliance, but trust was a scarce commodity. Back on Arcadia 9, the political tensions trickled down to the colonists. Supplies from Tyros were delayed, and rumors spread that some colonies might be withholding aid to strengthen their own defenses. Suspicion bred resentment. Jace found himself caught in the middle. As head of communications, he was responsible for maintaining lines between the colonies. The task was growing harder. Secret messages, coded warnings, and intercepted transmissions hinted at fractures widening within the alliance. One evening, as he sifted through encrypted channels, Jace stumbled on a disturbing message. A faction within one of the Allied colonies was plotting to break the alliance, believing that survival meant abandoning the weaker colonies to save themselves. He reported immediately to Lena, who frowned deeply. If we fall apart now, all this sacrifice will be for nothing. Meanwhile, Mara worked tirelessly in the engineering bays, pushing her team to develop new weapons and defenses. The scars of the last battle ran deep in her mind. Every night she dreamed of the explosion that took her closest friend, a fellow engineer who had died holding the line. Her grief fueled her resolve, but also pushed her to dangerous extremes. She began experimenting with untested energy amplifiers, risking the fragile systems in a desperate bid to give the colony an edge. Tomas noticed her growing obsession and approached her during a rare break. Mara, you need to rest. Pushing too hard will break you. She shook her head, eyes blazing. I can't stop. Not until this colony is safe. Tomas placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Safety comes not just from weapons, but from people. Don't lose yourself. Mara nodded slowly, the weight of her grief and duty heavy on her. As tension simmered within the alliance, the alien threat was far from idle. Scouts reported that the enemy was not only rebuilding, but forging new alliances with hostile factions across the galaxy. Their ambitions had grown, and their next strike promised to be even more devastating. One night, the colony's early warning system detected a new fleet approaching, larger and faster than before, equipped with advanced technology that outmatched anything humanity had seen. The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Lena and her officers scrambled to assess the threat and coordinate defenses. This is not a raid, Lena said grimly. They're coming for us all. The colony's fighters scrambled to meet the enemy in the skies, but it was clear the battle would be long and costly. The Allied colonies sent reinforcements, but the delays and distrust slowed their response. In the heat of battle, Jace's communication station was hit. Lines went dark just as critical orders needed to be sent. Panic threatened to take hold, but Lena's voice cut through the chaos over backup channels. "Hold the line. We fight for every breath." The battle raged for hours, the skies ablaze with fire and destruction. Soldiers and civilians alike fought side by side, their desperation and courage lighting a fierce spark. In the midst of the chaos, Mara's experimental energy amplifiers came online. The turret's power surged, firing devastating blasts that turned the tide in critical moments. But the strain was immense. The system overloaded, triggering explosions that rocked the command ship. Mara was injured in the blast, and several engineers were lost. As the dust settled, the alien fleet began to withdraw, battered but far from defeated. The victory was costly. The alliance was fractured, resources depleted, and the colonists exhausted. In the quiet that followed, Lena gathered her leadership team. "This war will not be won by firepower alone. We must heal our divisions or risk losing everything." The weight of her words hung heavy in the room. The fight ahead was not just against an external enemy, but against the fractures within their own ranks. Lena looked out over Arcadia 9 from the command ship's observation deck. The colony was scarred but alive, a testament to their will to survive. She knew the road ahead would be hard. The galaxy was vast and filled with enemies, but as long as they stood together, even the weakest colony could change the course of history. The fragile peace within the alliance was shattered more easily than Lena had feared. As the dust from the last battle settled, hidden tensions bubbled to the surface, threatening to tear apart the unity that had saved them. The scars of survival were both physical and emotional, worn by every colonist in the battered halls of Arcadia 9 and the shadowy command rooms across the scattered human settlements. Lena found herself caught in a storm of politics far heavier than any fleet invasion. Backroom whispers, veiled threats, and secret deals complicated every decision she tried to make. Some allies questioned her leadership outright, others plotted to leverage the colony's recent victories for their own gain. The lines between friend and foe blurred. One late night, as Lena sat alone in the command center reviewing intelligence reports, her comms crackled to life. "Commander Lena," came the voice of Sarah, the commander of Haven. Her tone was tense but cautious. "We have reports of a faction within Tyros plotting to break the alliance. They believe our survival depends on abandoning the front-line colonies." Lena's heart sank. How deep is the conspiracy? Enough to cause serious damage if not stopped. We believe they have allies in the communications network. Be careful, Lena. The words echoed in Lena's mind as she considered her next moves. Trust was a weapon, and betrayal lurked in the shadows. Meanwhile, Jace was grappling with his own demons. The nightmares of the battle haunted him, each face of a lost friend a ghost in his mind. The weight of maintaining communication among fragile alliances stretched him thin. He worked tirelessly, but exhaustion frayed his nerves. One evening, Mara found him slumped against a console, eyes glassy with fatigue. "You can't carry this alone," she said softly. "Let me help." Jace shook his head. "If I fail, everything falls apart. I don't want to lose anyone else." Mara sat beside him, her hand steady despite the trauma she carried from her own losses. "We fight together. That's what makes us strong." Their shared pain forged a quiet bond, a fragile thread of hope amidst the chaos. The colony itself was a microcosm of the larger conflict. Families struggled with loss, children grew up too fast in the shadow of war, and every victory was tinged with grief. Thomas, the colony's medic, became a pillar of strength, tending to wounds both physical and emotional. He worked tirelessly to keep hope alive. One day, a young girl named Lyra came to Thomas, clutching a worn toy and eyes full of questions. "Why do they want to hurt us?" Thomas knelt beside her, voice gentle. "Sometimes people don't understand each other, but we have to be brave and protect what we love." Lyra nodded solemnly, her innocence a stark contrast to the harsh world around her. As the political intrigue deepened, Lena received a covert message from an unexpected source, an alien diplomat from a faction at odds with the invading force. The message was cryptic but clear, a proposition for peace if humanity would consider alliances beyond their own species. Lena studied the transmission carefully. The offer was risky, potentially a trap, but also a chance to break the cycle of endless war. She convened a secret council with trusted advisors. "We can't fight this war alone," Lena said. "If there's even a chance to gain allies among the stars, we have to consider it." Mara frowned. "But how do we trust an enemy?" Sarah nodded. "Trust is a bridge we build step by step. Ignoring this could mean doom." Lena's decision weighed heavily. She authorized discreet contact with the alien faction, hoping to learn more. The negotiations were tense, marked by misunderstandings and deep-seated fear on both sides. Yet, amidst the cautious talks, Lena found a glimmer of hope. Some aliens sought peace, not conquest. Back on Arcadia 9, preparations continued for the inevitable next attack. Engineers worked to repair the damage from the last battle, while soldiers drilled relentlessly. The colony was becoming a fortress, but the cost was visible everywhere: scarred buildings, hollow eyes, and a collective exhaustion. Then, in the depths of space, the enemy fleet gathered again, larger and more merciless. The next battle would be unlike any before, a test not just of firepower, but of will, trust, and unity. As Lena looked towards the stars, she knew the fate of humanity rested on fragile alliances and unyielding courage. The weakest colony had become a beacon of hope, but the path ahead was dark and uncertain. And in the silence between the stars, unseen eyes watched, waiting to see if humanity would survive or fall. Lena stared at the flickering holographic projection before her, the translucent image of the alien diplomat shimmering like a ghost in the dim command center. The message had come through secret channels, encrypted, coded, and layered with cautious intent. It was unlike anything the colony had ever received. The emissary introduced itself as Taval, a representative of the Valari, a faction that opposed the warlike aliens who had attacked Arcadia 9 and the other human colonies. The Valari were a mysterious species, their forms elegant and slender, their eyes luminescent pools of blue light. Their voices carried a soothing melody, but beneath that calm was a cold intelligence and a deep weariness born of their own centuries-long conflicts. Lena had never met anyone like them. The offer was tentative: peace talks, a ceasefire, and possible alliances. The Valari wanted to end the cycle of violence that threatened to consume the entire sector, and they believed humanity might be a vital player in the delicate balance of power. But suspicion ran deep among the humans. Could the Valari be trusted, or was this a ploy to divide humanity's fragile alliance? What was their true motive? Lena convened a secret council, inviting only her closest advisors, Mara, Jace, Thomas, and Commander Sarah from Haven, whose experience in diplomacy was invaluable. "We can't ignore this," Lena said firmly. "If we can open a door to peace, even a crack, it's worth trying." Mara shook her head. "We've been burned before. The enemy disguises themselves in every form. We need to be cautious." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Trust is built in small steps. We should send an envoy to meet the Valari, but carefully. Jace leaned forward, fingers steepled. I can help secure the communications and monitor for any signs of deceit, but we must prepare for any outcome. Thomas added quietly, Hope is a weapon as strong as any gun. We need it. The decision was made to send a small diplomatic team to the Valari's homeworld, a distant and beautiful planet called Illyria, covered in shimmering forests and crystal-clear seas, an almost surreal contrast to the war-torn colonies. Lena chose Mara to lead the team. Her technical expertise and level-headedness made her the perfect candidate to navigate the complexities of alien technology and culture. Jace volunteered to manage communications remotely, and Tomas was assigned as the medical officer for the mission. The preparations were tense. The colonists watched with a mix of hope and fear as their representatives boarded the sleek Valari shuttle. The mission was dangerous. If the Valari were hostile, the envoys could be captured or worse. The shuttle lifted off amid a heavy silence. Lena watched until it disappeared into the starry expanse, praying the fragile trust would hold. On Illyria, Mara's team was greeted with cautious hospitality. The Valari leaders were graceful and composed, but their eyes held the weight of ancient sorrows and hidden dangers. The initial talks were polite but guarded. Mara quickly learned that the Valari had their own reasons for seeking peace. Their homeworld had suffered under a different warlord faction, and they saw humanity as a potential ally against the rising tide of conquest threatening the entire galaxy. But the Valari were also wary of humanity's reputation. Stories of brutal wars, reckless expansions, and internal divisions had spread through the stars. Convincing them that humans could be trusted would take time and honesty. Back on Arcadia 9, Lena coordinated the colony's defenses while maintaining constant communication with Mara's team. The Alliance held together by a thread, strained by fear and the unknown. Jace worked around the clock, decrypting Valari messages and relaying critical information. He grew closer to Mara through their shared mission, their late-night conversations a brief respite from the endless war. One night, Mara confided, They judge us harshly, not just because of our past, but because they fear what we might become. Jace replied, Maybe it's the same fear we carry, fear of the future. Meanwhile, Thomas treated members of the Valari delegation who had minor injuries from an accident during a ceremonial welcome. His gentle care helped build goodwill, breaking down barriers of mistrust. As days turned into weeks, the diplomatic mission made slow but steady progress. The Valari began sharing intelligence about the enemy's movements and strategies, revealing weaknesses and divisions among the warlike factions. Mara's team returned with valuable insights and cautious optimism. They had planted the seeds of alliance, but the path ahead was perilous. Just as hope blossomed, news arrived that the enemy was mobilizing again, preparing for a massive offensive. The colonies had only a short window to ready themselves. Lena gathered the alliance leaders. We have a chance, thanks to the Valari, but we must stand united. This battle will determine if humanity survives. The combined forces of the human colonies and Valari allies prepared for war like never before. Ships were repaired, weapons upgraded, and strategies refined. The coming battle was not just a test of firepower, but of trust, unity, and the fragile hope that peace could exist alongside war. As the enemy fleet approached, Lena stood on the bridge of the command ship, her heart pounding. She thought of Mara, Jace, Thomas, and every colonist fighting for survival. The weakest colony was no longer alone, and the stars were about to witness a battle that would change everything. The void before Arcadia 9 darkened as the enemy fleet loomed, vast and merciless, blotting out stars like a shadow of doom. But this time, humanity was not alone. Beside them sailed the Valari's elegant warships, their luminescent hulls shimmering with advanced technology and quiet power. The Alliance, fragile but forged in fire and hope, held fast. Lena stood on the command ship's bridge, her gaze steady as she watched the battle unfold. Around her, the hum of preparations mixed with the quiet prayers of those who had given everything. The moment of reckoning had come. The enemy struck first, a storm of plasma and missiles tearing through space. But the combined human and Valari defenses were ready. Turrets flared, shields glowed, and fighters surged into the fray. The battle was brutal and chaotic, ship against ship, will against will. In the thick of it, Lena's thoughts flickered to Mara, leading the ground forces on Arcadia 9, and Jace, coordinating communications that held the Alliance together. Tomas was tending to the wounded, both human and Valari, bridging the gap between species with compassion. The fight raged for hours, each side taking devastating losses. The enemy was relentless, but the Alliance's unity was their greatest weapon. Coordinated strikes and shared intelligence began to turn the tide. A critical moment came when a massive enemy dreadnought targeted the colony's main power generator. If it fell, the colony's defenses would collapse. Lena gave the order. "Target the dreadnought with everything we have. This is our line. Hold it." The combined fleet unleashed a barrage that rocked the enemy ship, crippling its engines and forcing it to retreat. The victory was hard-fought but decisive. As the last enemy ships fled, a stunned silence fell over the battlefield. The Alliance had survived. Against overwhelming odds, humanity and their new allies had turned back the tide. But the cost was heavy. Many ships were lost, and countless lives were forever changed. The scars of battle marked the colony and its people, yet hope burned brighter than ever. In the aftermath, Lena addressed the survivors, her voice steady and filled with resolve. "Today we proved that even the weakest colony, when united with hope and courage, can stand against the darkness. This is just the beginning of a new chapter, for Arcadia 9, for humanity, and for all who seek peace." The Alliance vowed to rebuild stronger, to forge bonds that could withstand the galaxy's harshest trials. The Valari and humans began working together, sharing knowledge and culture, learning that survival meant more than war. It meant understanding. Lena found a quiet moment with Mara, Jace, and Thomas on the colony's now rebuilt balcony. They looked out at the stars, knowing the battle was won but the journey far from over. "We did it," Mara whispered, her voice soft but fierce. "We showed them we're not just survivors, we're warriors." Jace smiled, exhaustion etched on his face. "And maybe, just maybe, we're something more. Hope." Tomas nodded, eyes shining with quiet pride. "Hope that can light even the darkest night." Lena placed her hand on theirs, feeling the strength in their bond. Arcadia 9 was the weakest colony once. Now it's the heart of a new future. As the twin suns set over the scarred but unbroken colony, a new dawn was rising, one forged from the ashes of war, built on the courage of those who refused to give up. The galaxy had witnessed the triumph of the weakest, and humanity's story was far from over.